The game The Invincible is based on the sci-fi novel of the same name by Stanisław Lem, a Polish writer widely known as one of the most influential figures in the genre. In this game we are tasked with exploring a planet where human feet have seemingly never trod, uncovering its curious features and, despite the desolate landscapes, encountering numerous anomalies, which hint that the planet is not nearly as empty as it wants to appear at first glance. This is by no means an action-adventure, but rather a detective story revolving around an attempt to unravel a global mystery, the central character of which is an entire planet called Regis 3, upon whose surface we have arrived as a mere accidental, or perhaps not so accidental, guest. So let's begin our descent into the retro-futuristic world of the game and get to know the Invincible. The game opens its presentation with a stylish comic book sequence, from which we learn that our character is a crew member of a small research vessel called the Dragonfly, which explores the far reaches of space. After visiting numerous worlds and planets, our mission has come to an end. However, on the way home, one more task awaits our crew. Despite the risks, the commander personally extracts an incredibly rare and valuable mineral at the cost of a broken leg. Setback aside, the crew joyfully celebrates the conclusion of their research mission. They set a course for home and head into hibernation chambers for some well-deserved rest. After that, the game abruptly cuts to the planet's surface, where a woman in a spacesuit wakes up lying on the ground, wondering how on earth she got there. Pushing ourselves up a bit, we try to contact the crew via radio, but only static answers back. The woman introduces herself as Dr. Jasna. Trying to stand up, she notes that her suit and body are unharmed, though her head is splitting for some reason. Checking the state of our gear, we quickly find that the radio receiver is broken. However, the transmitter still seems to be working, so we will keep broadcasting over the radio even if we can't receive any replies. The tracking beacon is lost, which is not good, but at least we have a few hours of oxygen left. Pulling a detector from our backpack, we check for any nearby beacons but find nothing. This means we are entirely on our own. Reviewing our notes, we discover that our team landed on a planet in two separate landers, which, according to the protagonist's words, is quite bizarre. Furthermore, it becomes clear that one group went to study the ocean. Why they didn't take their biologist Dr. Jasna along is completely unclear. Instead, she headed off alone in an entirely different direction. The journal entries help her remember that she was heading toward the camp. So that's where we'll go, trying to find any signs of our crew along the way. We begin exploring the area, observing the landscape, establishing basic navigation, and following our map notes until we finally locate the camp. Descending into the valley, Jasna moves toward a tent she spotted earlier when a sandstorm suddenly hits. Caught in the middle of it, we lose consciousness. When we come back, we realize we are much closer to the camp, though we have absolutely no memory of crossing those hundreds of meters. Finally arriving at the site, our detector picks up two beacon signals, and we see nothing but abandoned tents and a robot wandering aimlessly between them. We start searching the tents, and after a series of empty structures, we stumble upon a living member of our crew, Dr. Krauta. However, he's locked in a deep stupor and completely unresponsive. Utilizing his intact equipment, we finally establish contact with Commander Novik, who is currently aboard the Dragonfly in orbit with his broken leg. Examining the victim reveals no physical anomalies. His body is perfectly healthy, yet something is profoundly wrong with his mind. The commander makes it the top priority to locate all crew members and evacuate as soon as possible. This defines our objective for the foreseeable future, searching for the mission people and finding a suitable location to call down an evacuation pod. Before setting off to find the others, we must decide what to do with Dr. Krauta in his current state. The commander tells us he can take remote control over the robot to ensure the patient's safety. However, complications arise immediately. The camp's signal receiver was apparently damaged in the sandstorm, and the robot refuses to connect. At this moment, the game presents us with our first narrative choice. Rush off to find the other crew members as they might be in immediate danger, or delay to repair the broken equipment, thereby securing supervision for Dr. Krauta. Once the decision is made, we begin studying the mission log, where the crew actively recorded their actions. This becomes our guiding thread in our attempt to track down all the missing members, help them, and gather them in one place for a swift evacuation. Ahead of us lay many unusual landscapes, strange and intriguing findings, dark secrets, and of course tough choices, where we will be forced to choose the lesser of two or more evils, or simply the one that just feels right to us in the given situation. And let's establish right away perhaps the most crucial point in reviewing any game, its genre, as it dictates the core gameplay. The Invincible is a visual novel and a walk-in simulator where we admire beautiful environments, interact with objects, gather clues, navigate an unfamiliar planet, choose dialogue options, and occasionally make important narrative decisions, which can affect both the fates of the characters and the general direction of the story, including how quickly it ends, meaning the game features a degree of narrative non-linearity. To seamlessly tie this gameplay description to the opening sequence, here is a quick recap of the premise. We were flying home but woke up on an unknown planet with amnesia and now must find our crew and reconstruct recent events. Based on this, it isn't hard to predict what the rest of the game will look like. I'm telling you this directly because there will be no surprises that break out of the genre's boundaries or cleverly subvert its rules. Therefore, it's best to set your expectations realistically. This game is exactly what it appears to be and operates strictly within its genre framework. What the game truly deserves praise for, and this is probably its strongest suit, is its graphical execution and overall visual style. Even though the planet looks rather empty and at first glance lacks points of interest, yet it remains attractive in its own way and makes you want to examine it closely. Everything here looks beautiful and highly detailed in terms of polygons and pixels. And yes, given such a desolate landscapes and sparse world design, you naturally expect the rocks and sand to look amazing by default, and the game delivers, painting quite beautiful vistas. But what genuinely impresses on the visual front is the masterfully executed retro-futuristic design of everything in sight, a style often referred to as Atompunk. Almost every device in the game world is analog, completely devoid of any digital technology. Everything you can touch gives a satisfying tactile response, both audibly and visually. Knobs click as they turn, switches snap, cables plug snugly into sockets. All controls are physical and highly kinetic, featuring mostly rounded, curved designs. It truly feels like space through the lens of the 1950s and 60s, a relatively rare setting that brings a fresh wave of emotion. Naturally, this style and design extend beyond the environment right into our hands. I'm talking about the devices we carry in our backpack, which form our primary arsenal of tools designed to help us solve various tasks. For instance, a small telemeter allows us to spot distant clues and tracks, or simply inspect things from afar. A surface scanner lets us analyze the terrain for chemical traces and even peer slightly beneath the ground. Meanwhile, the tracker picks up beacon signals, operating like a small radar to guide us toward active devices, which is crucial for both navigation and finding crew members. And as a cherry on top, making the immersion into this world even deeper, we can see our own body, and most importantly, the edges of our spacesuit helmet with its dust and sand stained visor and the radio mic protruding from the side. This significantly enhances the experience and helps you believe in the authenticity of what's happening. All in all, just observing how familiar technologies, clothing, and other environmental elements are designed here accounts for a large portion of the enjoyment, making it feel like a virtual tour through a themed sci-fi museum. As for the story and plot, this is after all a narrative-driven game based on a book. We are dealing with a grand mystery, as mentioned earlier, and here is how it roughly works. First, we ended up on an unknown planet unexpectedly. Question: how did that happen? Especially since it clearly wasn't a crash, given that our ship is safely maintaining orbit and our suit and gear work perfectly. This is the first riddle. Second, what happened to our crew members, who, even if physically alive, don't respond or recognize us, remaining in a deep stupor and state of oblivion? This is the second piece of the puzzle. And third, what kind of planet is this anyway? Most of it is covered in rocks and desert, yet there are reservoirs of water right on the surface, which means life should exist. But where is it? Where is anything? What are these strange metallic plant-like structures? And what about these bizarre metallic rods with inexplicable geometry? This is perhaps the final and most important question, meant to give us a chance to touch upon the history and inner workings of this planet. All of this unfolds in such a way that, while we, completely puzzled, explore the planet and look for our missing colleagues, the protagonist occasionally experiences flashbacks. That's how she remembers key events from the recent past, gradually piecing together the backstory of their arrival on the planet and everything they managed to learn about this place. I must note that while this narrative device, amnesia followed by gradual memory recovery, is quite dated, it might be a byproduct of the original book, which was written back in the 1960s. Correct me if you've read it and know for sure. Otherwise, despite this retro approach to storytelling, the plot manages to intrigue from the very first minutes. The mid-game loses its grip a bit and drops the necessary tension, switching to routine tasks and extensive dialogue between characters, but the final act redeems itself. It refocuses on the central mystery, raising the stakes and striving to recapture the sci-fi thriller atmosphere we felt at the beginning. And of course the story couldn't progress or even exist without its main characters, who serve as the player's guides through this virtual world. There are about half a dozen characters in total, but only two are genuinely crucial. Dr. Jasna, our protagonist, and Novik, the crew and ship commander. These two maintain constant radio contact throughout almost the entire game, except for those rare locations where communication is physically blocked, like in tunnels. Through their endless dialogues, jokes, debates and arguments, this charismatic duo simultaneously feeds us all the necessary lore and simply keeps us entertained, ensuring we don't get bored while slowly traversing the picturesque wastes of Regis Tree. Jasna and Novik share a fairly simple and highly familiar dynamic, yet it works beautifully, creating convincing and organic conversations. Jasna is young, curious and slightly defiant. Novik is older, strict and skeptical. You can probably already picture what a dialogue looks like when two such distinct personalities clash, and it works really well. Their differences not only provide occasional light comedic relief, but also allow us to see two very different perspectives on the same situation, which is incredibly useful for us as explorers of a mystery-shrouded planet. It's important to note that despite their differences, they maintain professionalism and a chain of command. They speak respectfully, and Jasna almost always defers to and executes Novik's orders. Finally, the last aspect I'd like to highlight is a vital component to any game dealing with space, mystery and investigation, all of which apply directly here, and that is exploration. Yes, the game will give us hints about the next point of interest, the path to which we must discover. Once we arrive at the location, we immediately begin inspecting it, looking for clues or useful data, all to set off in search of the next point of interest. In essence, this is a form of exploration. However, to my taste, it feels exceptionally confined and artificial in this game. The planet, while nominally a massive celestial body, actually turns out to be a set of relatively tight locations connected by linear corridors. Therefore, I must emphasize that this game is not about exploration. And it's a pity, because when you see an unfamiliar planet, almost the first thought that comes to mind is how eagerly you'll explore it, uncover its secrets, and learn more about the alien features of everything around you. As a side note, there is an absolutely amazing game about planet exploration called Outer Wilds, which I made a video about in a non-English language. So if you'd consider watching a video with subtitles, you'll find the link in the top right corner of your screen right now. Otherwise, just make sure to check out the game, as it's truly an outstanding piece of art. Still, let's focus on all the things that are present rather than absent in this game and try to summarize what the Invincible is. The Invincible is a beautiful and highly immersive game. The visual side is executed at high level, and even if the locations are a bit empty, it is entirely justified by the nature of the environment. The main characters feel alive, charismatic, and make you want to follow their dialogue closely so as not to miss important lore or simply a fun, memorable moment. The game's story successfully intrigues and tries to maintain tension to keep the player engaged. Though it suffers from a noticeable pacing dip in the middle, it picks up steam again in the final act, where the player ideally should experience a sense of catharsis. And of course, the game's main highlight, which sets it apart from peers, is the fantastic retro-futuristic design of absolutely everything. You want to study this world and its contents not just for the story, but simply because it provides a wealth of aesthetic pleasure from a visual style that is quite rare in media. Here you won't find mechanics-heavy gameplay, a free-roaming planetary exploration, or even a literal adaptation of the source material. However, if you enjoy old-school science fiction, want to dive into an unusual detective story where the main antagonist isn't just another criminal, and of course, if you're willing to dedicate your time to a game solely for its visuals and narrative, then you should try to experience the stylish and immersive world of the Invincible. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you enjoyed it and would like to see more content like this, you already know what to do and which buttons to click. Also, you can find links in the description to support the channel. And that is all from me, and I hope to see you soon in a new video.